My name is Mike Hoagland. I am the founder of Dapper Consulting. Myself and my business partner work specifically with e-commerce agencies, really to help them be more profitable through all things, sales related, sales coaching, funnel generation, all that great kind of stuff, over to ensuring that your project delivery is as profitable as it should be, and you're not giving away work, meeting those good delivery processes and all that good kind of stuff. So thank you everyone for joining today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy a good interactive session as well. So if you want to use, I believe there's a questions section here on this platform. So if at any time you have any questions, please go ahead and just note those there. I will answer them, kind of in the middle of the webinar here. Without any further ado, we'll kind of get started here. So just a little bit about me and Dapper Moose. So as I mentioned, my name is Mike. I am in Minnesota. So I've got a little hobby farm. Goats. Owning goats is about as close as I'm going to get to owning my own moose. But wonderful out here. My business partner is Dallin Beck. She's located down in Florida, handles most of the kind of sales side of the company, while I handle a lot more of that project delivery side of things. I've been in project management itself for over 20 years. I've been working specifically with agencies and digital agencies for a good, I think, 12 of that, and e-commerce agencies specifically for the last 7 years or so. And so today, we are going to be talking a little bit about project management, sort of onboarding and training, and sort of what to expect, what to prepare for as you are onboarding those new folks. So one of the things, right, in terms of talking about this is why I feel this is such an important piece now. And that really is that your project managers are really central to your delivery and your client satisfaction. And those, when I say project managers, this could also be like account managers, depending on what kind of agency you work in. But typically I'm referring to the folks who are there offering or working directly with your clients to ensure that they're, communicating directly with clients, but are also managing those projects. Managing scope is a big one. And again, ensuring that your engagements are as profitable as they should be. And especially now, right, as we are, especially if you're working with Klaviyo or Shopify, any of these platforms that are introducing more and more AI-powered technology that actually is reducing the need for basically knowledge, right, in those engineering departments, in those coding departments, right? Your project managers are going to be the differentiator between you and your competitors, right? As the need for engineering skills sort of levels out with AI, it's really going to be that person-to-person interaction that is going to set your agency ahead. So that's really why I think focusing so much on project managers is such an important part of agency life, especially over the next couple of years as AI brings everybody kind of closer together skill-wise. When you have a poor onboarding for your project managers, your delivery folks, right, you're often going to face like client issues. There could be team friction there. And one of the worst parts about that is low retention, right? Turning over project managers, your clients definitely feel that, right? They feel that there's something going on internally. They don't feel like they have strong engagement, or folks who really know their business long term. They're really, most merchants are looking for partners in this space. But if you have strong onboarding practices, right, you can have those confident project managers, smoother projects, more satisfied clients, and that really helps grow whatever type of agency you're in, whether it be marketing or development. Having those confident PMs really helps not only your agency grow, but helps anyone in leadership get out of the day-to-day. So they're working more on the business rather than in the business. So some common pitfalls that I see, and we'll get into some more details of these, but is when, as an agency leader, right, you might be thinking of how you're going to onboard folks. You need to hire, when kind of what that looks like. Basically, that sink or swim approach is something that I think is a pitfall for a lot of us, right? We often don't think through how much time it takes to actually onboard somebody properly, especially if that person is relatively junior. Maybe they've only been doing this for a couple years. Maybe it's their first time at an agency life. So it's kind of throwing them into the deep end, kind of that sink or swim approach really doesn't do anybody any good, because you're not setting any expectations for what they need to do. You're not really setting them up to win. So if you've got that kind of sink or swim approach when you hire folks, I would really encourage you to rethink that mentality. Even if or maybe especially, if you're hiring junior folks, which is what a lot of agencies can afford right now. Really good, experienced agency project managers are very much in demand, and they come with a hefty salary. So a lot of folks are looking to those junior to mid-level right now to grow their careers. But in hiring those folks, you have to be ready to invest a lot of time in their growth. Right. So lack of defined processes is another pitfall. We'll get into some more of those specifics there. Unclear expectations is huge, as well as too little exposure to your tools, your cultures, your clients. Moving people through that process too fast and getting them in front of clients too quickly can really create some common pitfalls. And we'll kind of go over a few of those examples. Right. So we've got this kind of ramp up turn, and we'll put a few timelines around these things. But I like to think through when you're onboarding, say, a project manager, account manager, whatever you may want to call them, there's a sort of bunch of phases to go through. And the first one that I think is often overlooked is really learning the agency, right? And then from there, we're shadowing, we're assisting our team members. Then we kind of swap, where now our team members are assisting us as the new people, right? So they're leading, but with our support. And then phase 4 has that full ownership component. And we're going to break down what each one of these looks like. Also, as we move forward through all of these, you'll see that there are kind of 5 foundations that I like to touch on. Culture and values orientation is probably one of the biggest ones. But tools and tech setup, your processes, any playbooks you may have, shadowing and gradual exposure is huge, and then feedback loops and coaching. So let's get into, I think we got some details here coming up. So week 1, that kind of phase 1 that I mentioned, as well, getting to know the agency. So really that first week when you're hiring somebody, it could be week 1, week into week 2, focusing exclusively on the internal process of that agency, getting that person to know everything they can about the agency, right? The agency mission, who involves in the team, what sort of clients do you go for, kind of what's your ICP. Those are huge, right? You want your project manager to be able to be an advocate for everything that your agency is when they're in front of, when they're in front of clients. They may be in front of prospects. You really want them to be able to not necessarily like parrot, say word for word what your mission is, but be able to confidently talk about what it is as an agency you do, and confidently talk about as an agency what you don't do. What are the limitations? What's your ICP? Getting to know all of those folks. Also, getting to know the team is another huge one. We often silo a little bit our teams, right? Depending on your agency size, that could be, sales being siloed from delivery, or even project management a little bit siloed from engineering. But making sure that your project manager, especially in these days of everybody being remote, knows and has had a chance to meet just about everyone else on the team, especially anyone in leadership positions. So having that project manager meet with your head of growth or head of revenue, meeting with other salespeople, meeting with the head of the engineering teams or head of your marketing teams, head of your strategy teams, having that exposure. So each one of those people can talk about, what their day-to-day lives are, what some of their biggest challenges are in case, project management can help with that. and also what they need from project managers in their role, right? Sales, from a project manager standpoint, sales might need, actual, just make sure there's conversations with project managers for proper handoffs once something is sold. They might want to make sure they're included in retrospectives. So making sure that there is that communication between all your teams and they're meeting everyone timely, I think is really important, right? That first week, they should be meeting with everyone on the team that they can. And then also reviewing clients. So allowing people to get more in depth on, who your most important clients are, or what clients they might be taking over if they're coming into working with existing clients. And one thing that can really help with that is ensuring they have exposure to like your decks and those recordings. So if you know that they're going to be taking over, a retainer for client X, having that SOW ready for them to go. If there's been any additional deliverables over the past year for that client, having them ready to go. And at this point, there really shouldn't be any reason that your calls with your clients aren't being recorded, right? Between all of the AI tools, the transcription tools, which makes a project manager's job so much easier. Start making sure that you're recording almost all of your client calls, sales calls, etc., are great so that you can then give those recordings to someone who could be coming on board. So project managers can start to see how, good, say, weekly meetings, right? How are they being handled, and what's resulting in good ones? What are great examples of a call of collaboration? Maybe you're a type of agency that does discoveries, right? What does a good discovery call look like? So making sure that you can provide those great examples allows then your new team members to sort of understand what are good examples of basically doing their job. And also, of course, like your culture codes, your unwritten rules, right? I think everybody has, or something similar, right, to a handbook, right? Standards handbook, all that great kind of stuff. And usually that goes over all like the legal things and all of that stuff. But we can often miss sort of what are some of our culture codes might be, what are some of our unwritten rules might be. An example of this is I remember one time I had started at an agency. I was maybe just like a month in or so. We had a big event the night before. The next day, this is when we were still in an office. I had ordered in food for myself. I got a little bit of flack for it because I didn't open that order up to everybody else who happened to be in the office, if anyone else wanted in on that group order. So it was one of those things where it was just like, oh, there's a culture here of, hey, if you're going to have food ordered in, send it, if time frame is not a problem, send an invite to everybody, let them know an order is about to be placed so they can get in on that action. And that also helps drive culture, right? People sharing food, ordering together is a cultural builder. So thinking through those areas of like, oh, what do we do for fun? What do we do to kind of work together? And those culture codes are also really great things to impart to your initial hires. Cool. So weeks 2 to 3, that's where I'm really looking at tools and process, right? So the new team member, the new project manager knows all about us as an agency. They know all about, who we are as a team, who to go through for questions, who's, leading various departments. And so now we get into a little bit more of the tools, right? That we're looking at, the nitty gritties, right? What are our project management tools that we're using? Are we using ClickUp, Asana, Jira? How do we use these things? What are the appropriate, what fields need to be included? How often is it used? When is it used? When are we using Slack versus the project management tool? So setting up some of those pieces, right? And making sure they have access to all of these. They have access to Slack, PM tools, to your documents and files, whether you're using Google Docs or, storing stuff in Notion or Confluence, however you might be doing it, ensuring that they have access to everything that they're going to need and they know how to use those tools is appropriate. I remember I've made this mistake onboarding people and being onboarded, but of like all of a sudden just a tool was missing, right? And I didn't even know it existed. Oh, I didn't, not getting access to Google Drive meant I didn't even know that it existed for where some of these files are. I didn't know we were using Confluence because I was never invited to it. I never shared on how it was used. So making sure if there are all of those tools at people's disposal, that they do have the proper access and they know how to use those tools. What are the rules there? If you haven't written down those standard operating procedures, I encourage you to really start doing that. It's going to make your onboarding life a lot easier. You can give your new employees basically a list, right? Of, hey, here's the articles you need to read. Here are the things that you need to be familiar with. And that really helps kind of automate, if you will, that onboarding life cycle. And it means that it allows your new hires to review everything you've put together and then ask questions of you rather than you having to be the one who is like guiding them through everything each and every time. If there are resources, evergreen resources that they can go to, that's going to make your job as somebody who is onboarding a new person so much more important. I mentioned that just SOPs, templates, and reporting tools. So is good there. And so that's weeks 2 to 3, right? So we've got somebody, they've been with us about 3 weeks, maybe about a month, and they're really starting to internalize our processes, what we're doing, how we work. They've got familiar with our tools. The next step for me anyway is shadowing. This one, again, it can be often overlooked because we've got 2 project managers who are completely overloaded. We just need to get the next one in there as quickly as we can to start taking, workload off of those folks. And oftentimes that can then set up our new project managers, especially if they're a little bit more junior, can set them up for failure just because they don't know the processes, right? What is it we're supposed to be doing? How do we interact with our clients? When is it appropriate to say no and push back on clients? All those things. And those are all things that are sort of learned through osmosis, right? They're learned by shadowing people that we're working with, right? So, and that weeks 3 to 5, that's when we're really looking at shadowing, right? And so they are going to, I like to pair up a new hire with 1 or 2 other project managers, where those project managers are basically inviting this new person to all of their client meetings, all of their internal meetings. They're not really being asked to do much, especially in that week 3 to 4 range. They're really just asking to sit in and absorb it, right? So these could be, again, client check-ins. Introduce this new person to the client just so the client knows why this new random person is sitting there. But just introducing it as, hey, this is somebody they're onboarding to our team. They're here just to shadow and listen in on our conversations and how we talk. I've never once had a client have a problem with that. And it's even a better kind of relationship building piece so that also this client knows, hey, if something were to happen to their existing project manager, right? Project manager wins the lottery, takes off from that point, that there is somebody who is familiar with their accounts, familiar with them as well, who could come in and step into some of that role. Retrospectives are another great one to bring your new hires into. What projects, what went well in a project or an engagement, what went wrong, what could be done differently. That's an opportunity for those new hires to learn from the whole team in that retrospective about what went well and what didn't, so that they can, in thinking of their future engagements and their projects, what they should try to mimic and what they should try to avoid. Reviewing past projects. So this is another one. I mentioned this kind of in the past one, but are there any other projects? Like how did these go? Giving people access to past examples of weekly reports, how a project went through, whether if you have internal reporting, giving them examples of that. But knowing, say, if this was going to be a discovery, what did that discovery look like? What were the deliverables? What were the communications throughout? Allowing them to kind of, again, learn through osmosis. And then once you get into that week 5, this is where I think it's important for them your new hires to start working, but working without kind of the pressure. So what I recommend in this area are things like, hey, if the PM has to deliver something, right? Whether that be a project timeline or maybe a budget plan, maybe that's a weekly report, something similar. The current project manager, right? The more senior one should still do that work, but then also have that junior PM, the person who is shadowing, have them do the same thing, right? If I'm leading a project and I've got a trainee on board, I might need to create a new timeline. Say maybe it's a sprint timeline for the next month or so. Given everything I know, I'm going to create that plan. And then I'm going to ask my person shadowing me to create that plan as well, separate from me. It's not going to go to the client. It's really just to check to see, hey, where are they in this process? And then we'll compare, right? We'll compare the timeline that I created versus the timeline that, the trainee created. And that allows us now to have a conversation. What did the trainee miss? Or what's similar, right? First of all, where did the trainee succeed in putting together this timeline? If they're vastly different, why are they vastly different? It allows that person who is training the new employee to actually have a discussion about why. Why did they make certain decisions? Why did I only give this engineer 10 hours a week? And that might be going into then, I looked at, our resource planning. They're only available for that amount of time every week. So that's why I made this timeline the way that I did. Having those why discussions rather than just the sort of what we did, but why we did them really helps project managers learn and become more independent, which I think is like such that important piece. If we're only teaching project managers what to do, we're not really teaching them how to think and how to problem solve themselves. And then that becomes a burden on leadership, right? Leadership then has to think through what are all the problems that can arise. They're usually dealing with more fires, all that kind of thing. But if you're empowering your project managers to think through why they're making the decisions that they're making, oftentimes that keeps leadership outside, and able to focus more working on the business rather than getting into those weeds. So again, having that trainee create a version of a deliverable, they'll never actually be delivered, but having them create that alongside the real version allows for that conversation to happen about why or what would need to change potentially around the trainee's deliverable. What's also great is it also, as someone, if you're a trainer, if you're the PM, leading this new trainee person, it allows you to gauge their readiness level to kind of move on to the next phase, right? If they deliver you a budget plan or a project timeline that is 95% the same as the one that you created as an experienced PM, you can trust that, hey, they're ready to go. Like we can set them on a real project, set them in front of clients, rather than just hoping, I hope they do a good job. They've actually now proven that they can do a good job. So it's a great test. So then from there, those weeks 6 to 8, for me, that really allows for that gradual ownership, right? And so in that gradual ownership, you're looking at kind of moving responsibilities onto their plate slowly. You don't want to give them everything all at once, to be responsible for everything all at once. That often is, things start falling through the cracks in that way. And there's just so much to learn. Even an experienced PM might have so much to learn that things start falling through the cracks. We miss certain things. So owning up that gradual leadership. So first, giving them lead on internal pieces, right? We're going to keep that risk low of them actually, getting involved in a client really before they're ready. But if they're about to take over for a particular client, if we're going to hand off from 1 p.m. to another, first they might start leading those internal stand-ups. What are we working on today? What are we working on tomorrow? What is our plan? Where are we at for this project? Or if if you're doing retrospectives, whether that be monthly or project-based or whatever, having those new project managers start lead internal only meetings first gives them the presence and the practice of speaking internally. It allows then for also a feedback cycle. So if your more senior PMs are also in those stand-ups, in those retros, they can then follow up with feedback to the trainee. Things like, I would have pressed, engineer B for a more specific timeline. In order for you to be able to communicate properly with the client, I would have gone into that meeting with a little bit more prep on having our ClickUp tasks all ready to go and in review. So there's a lot of training that can be done and a lot of feedback that can be given just by having the team members start with those internal meetings first. Also in that gradual ownership might be, I think usually managing smaller projects first with some review. So maybe taking on a retainer or two where, it's small bite-sized deliverables that you're working on. It's maybe the budgets are a little bit more clear because they're a little bit more confined. Maybe it's a non-coding project where our scope is very rigid. All of those little small areas are great to have somebody start out on because it involves less projective thought. And by that, I mean, you don't have to think so far ahead. Say, for example, as a counterpoint on a big, website build, for example, if we're going to start all the way in discovery with a brand new person that goes through discovery and design, that's a place where you need to be watching that budget all the way through. You might not be sure, right, how much budget is actually going to be used over in the development phase. There's just not a lot of institutional knowledge that new person has. So kicking them right away into a large project and a long-term project means that they don't really know what to expect, what to think through. So you're more likely to have some hiccups and some failures on those larger projects than you are on those smaller ones. So they get a good cadence under their belt. Also, leading things internally and managing smaller projects also allows the rest of the team, your engineers, your designers, your strategists, to develop confidence in that project manager, right? Project management has a lot of sort of unofficial authority to it, right? It's authority that we're giving our team members, our project managers, to make timelines, to assign people work. But they also don't have actual authoritative action, right? They can't hire or fire people, they can't put people on PIPs, etc. So that, that leadership that they need to earn and be shown is vital creating those relationships with those team members is super important. And then also in this gradual ownership, we're starting to introduce metrics, right? Talking about margin, awareness. What is our average billable rate, for example, on this project? How do we measure that? And how do we know we're on the right trajectory, right? How do we, at our agency, how do we measure velocity? Talking through all those metrics that the new trainee, the PM, is going to be measured by is important. A lot of times we forget to actually talk about what success in this role looks like. We might even just say projects are on time and are on budget, or clients are happy, or kind of vague notions like that. And those aren't really helpful for a project manager to really understand what their job is. So creating those more specific metrics, right? Maybe around average billable rate on projects, or around like client satisfaction surveys, things like that. Whatever they're going to be measured on, make sure that they're aware of that and they know how that data is being collected. And then from there, weeks 8 to 12, you're leading up to that full rollout, right? So that by the end of 12 weeks, they're acting relatively kind of autonomously, right? So they're going to be leading and running full with client communications, including client meetings, whatever communication method you're doing, all of that great kind of stuff. They're able to run projects end to end. All that good kind of stuff. They're clearly going to have questions. I do think it's about 6 months for like a complete, hey, this person's ready to run almost exclusively on their own. But really by the end of by end of 3 months, there should be a good, that person should be really ready to take the reins. But then also during this process, especially that 8 to 12 weeks, that 360 feedback from teams and clients and leaders, I think is extremely valuable. The feedback from the team, I think, being one of the most important things, right? So around that end of month 3, I would be sending like a 360 feedback form to everyone that this new PM has worked with, right? Engineers, designers, leaders, and to really get their feedback about, hey, where is this person providing real value? Where do you see this person struggling and might needing more help? Because sometimes, often as leaders, we're not really seeing the little ways that project managers might be impacting positively or negatively the rest of our team. We're just not involved that closely. So allowing for those team members to provide that 360 feedback means that you can catch any of these little or big, but any of these things that they can improve and these discrepancies, you can catch them, address them, and squash them right away, kind of within this 2 to 3 month period, rather than letting those things fester, letting them become habit, and going from there. One of the sayings I use in one of my other presentations is what we permit, we promote. So if we permit our new team members to make these consistent little mistakes, or act in ways with our team that aren't really fitting within our processes, right? If we permit that to go on too long, that all of a sudden becomes something that we're actually promoting. We're saying, hey, that's okay for you to do this. And it's going to be much harder to change their activities. So catching it early is vital. And 360 reviews are one of the best ways to do that. Cool. So what I think folks, should know by 90 days, is how this is outside of a project as well. But how do you scope, right? How do you price? How do you price things? How are they scoped? What to expect through those SOWs? And how do we deliver projects? And by that, I mean, are we doing weekly reports? Are we meeting with our merchants once a week, once a month? How are our deliverables defined? Because that is different for every agency. But your PM should be able to confidently talk about how you scope, how you price, and what your delivery process looks like after 90 days. If they can't, if it sounds like they couldn't describe the process properly, or they speak with it unconfidently, 2 things to look at then is, one is, did you provide every piece of training that you could have or that you should have in order to kind of build them up? Or were they not necessarily paying attention? Are they the right fit? If you feel strongly that you provided everything and held their hand, guided them through this 90-day process, if they're still unable to kind of talk about you as an agency and how you work, that might be an indication that this person isn't necessarily right for this seat. Also being able to talk about, right, where all your resources live, your SOWs, your templates, anything that they might need. And then also what that successful project looks like. And again, that successful project is really up to you as an agency to define. Is it meeting certain budget requirements? Is it meeting timelines? What are those metrics so that they know what it is they're being measured against? So talking about what a leader should provide, right? As you are bringing a new project manager on board, some things that we haven't talked about right yet are a cleared onboarding calendar, right? What is the expectation week to week? That first week could even be, what are the expectations day to day? Who from the team are they meeting with each day? What resources are they expected to get through maybe each day, or what's being provided? Likely that first week, you can't even provide 8 hours of content a day, which is okay. It gives people that chance to kind of ramp up a little bit into that role, into that new role. But having that calendar, what those expectations are, right? If we're expecting that they're going to start moving into shadowing week 3 or 4, have that be indicated in a calendar. If we're expecting that they are taking over clients, by day 90, make sure that's in a calendar. So it's clear what those expectations are all the way along. That makes it easier on you as a leader to ensure that they're following this practice. You don't have to be worrying every day about what it is that they're doing or how they're acting. And also it provides them the ability it provides your new hires a lot of comfort, typically, to know, hey, these guys have a training process. I'm being taken care of. I'm not just being left out here kind of in the ether. It builds a lot of trust with your new employees when you can provide a kind of training program and a training timeline. Making sure as well that they have another project manager who is like their buddy or their mentor, someone that is designated to be that person's resource for questions. Unless this is your first PM hire, right? In which case, as a leader, that you might have to be that mentor, that buddy. But if you already have a PM who's doing a great job, that person should be the buddy. It is important to note that is now taking time, right, out of that project manager's day to train up the next person. So you're probably hiring, right, a PM because workload has gotten too big. It's harder for people to do their jobs properly. So we need another person to take on some of this workload. That is the long-term goal, but it's important to remember that in the short term, hiring someone new increases the workload of basically everybody else at the agency. You need people who are willing to dive in, who are willing to provide support, whether that's you as a leader or a PM team leader, whatever. They are going to have to be available to provide support and feedback to that new hire on top of their current duties, right? So it's like 90 days, hey, my workload is going to be reduced because I'll be handing off a lot of this work to the new employee. But for those first 90 days, my workload is actually probably going to increase because of the amount of training I have to do. I think as leaders, we often overlook how much effort needs to be put into a successful training program. So don't underestimate how much work this is going to be. And if you already have a senior PM or an existing project manager who is on the cusp of burnout, and you're hiring someone in to take some of that workload off, please don't assume that project manager can handle all of the training plus their current workload. You may need to, as a leader, to take some of that existing work off of them to cover them for a couple months. You might need to handle the training yourself because you can't put it on that PM. But do remember to take into account the actual toll that training takes on both time and just cognitive ability in terms of switching back and forth between working on your merchants and clients and training individuals. Having that starter resource kit, right? So where do you go to, what checklist do you have with links that provides links to your tools, your SOPs, your videos, things like that? Anything that you can provide to your new hires for them to go out and explore on their own, rather than being kind of spoon-fed everything one link at a time, is really going to save you a lot of headache. And then kind of going back up to that first one, right? Space to ask questions, get coaching, making sure that there is that feedback loop where they can ask questions, provide that feedback, get more clarity. I think not providing enough clarity to a project manager's questions, or really any hire's questions, is one of the biggest mistakes we make in leadership. And we just assume that they're going to either figure it out or already know the answer. But making sure you are welcoming of those questions as they're learning is vital. Just a couple things, talking about like when you want to create those task lists, onboarding tools. If you've already used a PM tool like ClickUp or Asana, you can create an actual project board or folder, however you may call it, a template, that has all the PM steps in there, that has all the links that people go through. You can assign due dates to those tasks, like, oh, these videos should be reviewed by X date. So that is a great way to organize your like PM onboarding steps. What's also great if you do in your PM tool is it also gets your new project manager used to working within your tool. So it's kind of a good double whammy there. But other ways to do it, I see a lot of great folks working with Notion, using Notion as sort of a wiki, having an onboarding page within Notion that then provides links out to all the important onboarding information. That's a great one. Or even just a Google Doc, right? Something that has a list of info, links, explainers. However, if you're going down that route, as long as there is something there. But kind of that more sophisticated version would be something kind of within your project management tool. Again, if you have your SOP wikis, right, Notion or Confluence or whatever you might be using, and then that task list and those role specific KPIs, so that you can always again know, hey, how am I being judged in this role? Cool. And then that scorecard. So we talked a little bit about KPIs, right? What is it that they are actually going to be measured on, right? Things that we might care the most about as an agency, right? Is like on-time delivery, right? If we say we're going to have something by next Thursday, are we able to produce? I mean, how often are we able to produce that? How often are we missing those timelines? Right, client satisfaction. One of the things that I do like best for these is like a leadership once a month, maybe once every other month, sending out a quick 5-question survey to clients, to merchants, just to gather information about how satisfied they are working with us. There's always a question there about how well you're getting along with your project manager. Those are ways then that you can kind of quantify your more qualitative data, and say like, hey, cool, out of all these questions are out of 5, we need to maintain an average of 3.75, across the board with your clients for you to be considered to be doing a good job. So that is another way to actually measure and provide feedback, with those data on how your team is being measured. Team collaboration, again, similarly, that's more anecdotal, but that is, doing more 360 reviews, understanding how team members are working together and enjoy working with you as a project manager. And then your budget and margin health, right? Are you using average billable rate as a KPI metric? Are you using utilization rates as a metric? Whatever it is that you're using as those metrics, making sure that there is a goal, and then making sure that that goal is clear and communicated, and also how people can be achieving that goal. Usually for something as well, I guess, as for people who are relatively new, you might want to ramp up that goal, right? If we have an average billable rate goal of ensuring we're making $175 an hour across all of our billable projects, the first 6 months might be, hey, the goal is that for a new person might actually be, well, the goal is 160, right? We're lowering that a little bit. We assume there's going to be some mistakes. We assume there's going to be some free work. But then once we hit, say, 6 months in, that KPI then bumps up to, say, the 175 or 170. That allows us to ensure that we're making the money we need to make on our projects. Cool. And then again, so we're kind of going back that 30, 60, 90 plan, that overarching plan, right? What do they learn? Kind of what do they learn at first? for that first 30 days, that next 60 days, the next middle section, what are they practicing? And then that third section, now it's what are they owning? So we learn, we practice, and we own. Having performance milestones over across that plan and check-ins at each phase, right? What it is, how are they doing? How do we think that they've picked up everything in that learning phase? In that practice phase, how do the existing PMs think they're actually doing at that? And are they ready then to move on to that own phase? Having those almost gates where, peers or leaders are checking off, yep, they've learned everything, let's move on to practice. Or they practiced everything, let's move on to ownership. That really helps ensure that by the time they get to owning their projects and working directly with the clients, multiple people have weighed in and said, yep, this person knows what they're doing. I trust them. And they are, they're ready to go. One of the things that I do kind of like to mention here, right, is a quote here from James Clear, right? You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I've added here expectations, which I think is important. We don't, oftentimes as leaders, we don't communicate our expectations appropriately. And again, this goes back to everything I've been saying so far. What's the calendar? What's the cadence? And what are the KPIs they're going to be measured against? And so making sure you set those clear expectations in your onboarding schedule helps everyone stay on board. And also, I hate to say it as well, but I am going to say it as well. If you have a good checklist, you have good realistic expectations, by the time you get to the end of that time frame, if that person has not been able to meet your expectations, and you can confidently say, hey, we've done a lot of good training, other people have gone through this training and been successful, and for some reason this person isn't successful, that's a good indicator that this might have not been the best hire, right? And rather than spending more time or letting this person get in front of more clients and pose risk, that now is the time to actually potentially offboard this person, make a change, and move on. One of the biggest mistakes that agencies make, and again, I hate to be the person saying this, but it's true, is holding on to people, especially project managers, who are no longer or who never could meet the expectations and the needs of the agencies. We're often small teams, right? It hurts, it sucks to let somebody go. But at the end of the day, you are a business. You need the best people that you can get for the job. And agency life is also difficult. And PMs for agencies especially can be a bit like unicorns. They can be a little bit harder to find. They have a specific skill set, right? They need to be good in front of people and clients and controlling those clients, but they also have to be detail oriented and curious and want to kind of have all their ducks in a row. That's not for everybody. So holding on to those people too long can really damage your agency. It can really ingrain bad practices, not only in that existing PM, but those can spread to other PMs. Really having that process down, really having that 90-day process down, and acknowledging that if somebody isn't meeting your expectations after, those 90 days, those 6 months, that holding on to them is going to do more damage in the long run than it is to restart the training process with somebody new. Cool. Well, with that, we kind of hit the end here. So if there are any questions or anything like that, perfectly happy here, either in the chat function or the question functions. I'll be watching those. If you would like to get in contact with me, I'm on LinkedIn or Mike at dappermooseconsulting.com. We work with agencies of all kinds to improve sales process, PM practices, PM coaching, all that great kind of stuff. So if there is anything there, don't hesitate to connect. And with that, we do have a question in. So for anyone who's not seen, I'm just going to read it. What would you advise if there is onboarding when the old PM is offboarding? The new PM knows the company, its culture, and its goals. The new one is not a trainee, but an experienced PM just in the product field, not the agency. Is there anything that we should pay attention to? If there is an old PM offboarding, one of the things that I've learned the hard way, and it is also human nature, but as they're offboarding, they are more quickly stopping to care about what goes on within the agency. So they may be presenting some poor practices that maybe they weren't before. They, might be not following up with clients maybe as frequently. It's just natural, right? As we're going to leave a job, we're not doing as good at that job as we were before. So something to watch from a leadership level is if you have a rising PM and an old PM offboarding, that old PM isn't leaving a mess for the new PM to clean up, and isn't instilling like bad practices, right? So, if the new one is an experienced PM as well, just not in agency life, but coming from the product field, that can be, I think, one of the more jarring changes as well. Most of the times people coming from the product field, they're not used to dealing with clients. So therefore, they're not used to dealing with like objection handling. They're not used to really controlling client expectations. They're probably thinking more in like a sprint, or they're trying just to accomplish, get certain features through and working with developers. So one of the things that is most jarring for folks moving into agency for the first time is really getting detailed and setting up expectations properly with clients. They might also tend to like give away some work, right? They're not really worried about scope. They maybe haven't had to worry about budget so much before on the product side. So really focusing on what a successful project means is key for those folks, and really focusing on what differs between agency life and product life. And almost all of that is wrapped up in controlling clients, controlling narratives, and setting expectations properly. Katerina, hoping that was somewhat helpful. Perfect. And if there are any other questions out there. Cool. Well, if not, this was the end of the presentation for me. I'll hold on just another minute in case anything else comes into chat. But I want to thank everyone so much here for joining me. I think there's also going to be a small ebook coming out with a lot of this information kind of as a follow-up here. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your week, and hope to see y'all later. Thanks so much, everybody.